3 weeks into Diablo 4 Season 11, and I'm still playing. And that is not something I expected to be saying. The season is still genuinely enjoyable, Paladin builds are popping off, people are improvising their own setups, and for once you don't need to follow a build guide just to be T4 viable. But the moment you step into the secret uber endgame level, you might leave a bit disappointed. Then over in Path of Exile 2, a temple exploit didn't just break the league mechanic, it reshaped the economy, and if you care about trade, it might have made your league way harder suddenly overnight. After that, we'll also cover how RAM and GPU price inflation are threatening next-gen console release timelines, as well as EA's $55 billion buyout that just got a 99% shareholder vote. Hey folks, this is Riker, and I dig into ARPG and gaming news so that you can spend more time playing games. But before we dive in, just a quick word from this video's sponsor, Incogni. It feels like every month you hear a new story about a cyber attack or a data breach that results in personal information getting leaked. From passwords and email addresses to social security numbers and phone numbers. Just a couple months ago, there was a Discord data breach where even billing information got leaked. We also had that Gmail password leak, 183 million users affected. Every time I hear these stories, I'm like, okay, great, now I gotta go change all my passwords. And while that's an inconvenience, in the meantime, our personal data is getting collected, aggregated, and traded like a commodity. And it's a lot of work for us to track down whatever unauthorized personal info about us may be floating around on the internet to get it taken down. And that's where Incogni comes in. It's a service that seeks to protect you by removing any unauthorized trace of you from the internet. They reach out to data brokers on your behalf, request that your data be removed, and deal with the pushback. With Incogni, you can at least feel like someone is fighting back to keep you safe. Here's my Incogni dashboard. I've got 4 requests left in progress, and 189 have been completed. Incogni has also added a family plan that lets you extend your coverage to up to 4 additional members, as well as an unlimited plan which introduces Incogni's custom removals feature, where you can point to any website where your personal info is visible, and then one of Incogni's privacy agents will take care of the rest. So go to incogni.com/Riker and use code Riker to get an exclusive offer of 60% off. Incogni helps erase you from the internet. They can't steal your identity if they can't find you. Click the link below to claim your 60% off and take your personal data off the market. Starting with Diablo 4 news, we're 3 weeks into Season 11 and D4 still good. Paladin continues to be a huge success among players in terms of fun, fantasy, and playstyle. And thanks to how busted the Castle Paragon node is, so many different Paladin builds that players are independently slapping together are viable. Players don't feel like they have to follow a build guide to make a T4 viable build. Now, of course, the top Paladin builds in the game have reached over pit level 140, but for a lot of players, just being T4 viable is enough, and people are enjoying exploring the different Paladin playstyles. For the most part, it feels like you can pick a skill and make a build around that skill, and you can do it yourself, you don't have to follow a guide. And overall, something this season accomplishes quite well is getting the average player to feel like everything is attainable. Yes, the streamers and the blasters, they're going to be doing way higher pit levels, they're going to be engaging in a degree of mythic item farming efficiency that is well beyond what an average gamer can do, but the average gamer can still get their mythics this season. They can get their legendary runes, they can afford to craft and to reroll and to do all the activities in the game, all without having to spend 5 hours a day every day playing. Now, for some people that might be a bad thing, but for the audience that Diablo 4 has increasingly moved to capture, it's widely successful. And for the tryhards, the blasters, the streamers, they did add the aspirational secret uber fight, something that the average player will not experience. The drop rates on the components are so low, and that's great, don't buff it. However, the rewards from the fight itself, disappointing relative to the rarity of this event. You get 1 spark, cool, there's plenty of ways to get sparks at this point. By the time you do this event, you're going to have plenty of sparks. You get a ton of ancestral drops. Cool. By this point, you're already decked out in ancestral gear. Given how hard it is to get everything you need for this event together, and that the major reward is a one-time thing on your character, I'd make it drop, make it drop 1 of each mythic item plus all 4-star ancestral gear. And maybe then, maybe, you won't end up salvaging it all. In Diablo 2, once you farmed up everything to do the Pandemonium event, right, Uber Tristram, you were rewarded with a Hellfire Torch, a best-in-slot unique charm that drops only from there, and you can only ever equip one of these at a time. If you did Uber Diablo clone, right, he dropped an Annihilus charm, another best-in-slot, can only equip one item. Point is, these events had a reward that was proportionate to how difficult it was to access them and defeat them. Now, for now, with this event in D4, it's not a big deal. This event is more of a pleasant surprise Easter egg, but I think it's an excellent foundation for more of this kind of content in the future, and I would just like to see future events like this have rewards that are proportionate to their rarity. If there's a concern about it being too rewarding if people farm it, then just lock the reward to like once per character or once per account per season even, depending on what the reward is exactly. This is good content to have in the game to bring more to the end game, to give us more to aspire to. Then some other suggestions. Mythic Prankster Nightmare Dungeon sigils. They should probably drop with a purple beam. They are effectively 5 mythics in one. We want to get real hype when we see that drop. And I'm sure plenty of players have accidentally left one of these behind. We get so many keys. We don't have enough inventory space for them when we're doing world bosses. I'm sure a lot of people have left keys behind accidentally or on purpose. And, you know, I'm sure someone somewhere left one as a mythic key. Also, again, because we're getting inundated with so many and most Nightmare Dungeon keys are garbage, and we're just target crafting for a couple of specific affixes, we're scrapping most keys, and so I'm sure some people have accidentally scrapped a mythic key before they really noticed. So just a little quality of life thing here. I also saw a suggestion to have a mechanic whereby we can combine multiple Undercity tributes into one juiced tribute. I really like this idea. Individual Undercities may not feel worthwhile to run at a certain point, but imagine you can stack up like 10 of them, and then you do an Undercity that is 10 times as difficult, but 10 times more rewarding. You're doing it once you're at a level of power where it won't take you 10 times as long to run it, and hey, you may actually fail, or you might die for a change, which, you know, would shake things up. And you could probably do something similar with Nightmare Dungeons and Infernal Hordes as well, right? Like, combine, juice them all to make an Uber run that is far more challenging and takes less time to do. Pits also seemingly have no place in the game anymore beyond getting your glyphs leveled up. Some people celebrate this because they don't really like doing pits, but I'm not sure it's a good idea for an activity to become completely obsolete. You know, for any possible reward in the game, you would be better served doing an activity other than pits. But the pit is the most challenging activity in the game, so for that to become obsolete once you reach your most powerful state, right? You get your glyphs level 100, which is a significant power boost. I still see some people questioning, is it really worth it to level up your glyphs? Yes, the answer is very yes. Like 46 minimum, but then 46 to 100 is another huge jump in power. So again, once your glyphs are at 100, and now you have no more reason to do pits, now you have to continue farming in T4, like the easiest content in the game at that point. It doesn't make sense, especially when the current meta is basically AFK farming bosses. So this kind of brings the topic of difficulty into question, right? They brought us evolved monster combat with Season 11, and I do believe you feel this during the 1 to 60. You do feel the monsters being smarter and more aggressive, but then once you reach endgame, it feels like it doesn't really make a difference anymore. Monsters pretty much all feel the same. The only thing that really matters is their elite affixes. That's what differentiates monsters, right? Monsters themselves, the model, it's the interchangeable meat sack that you attack, and it's the affixes, the falling swords, the explosions, the spinning blades. That's what you're really playing around and actively dodging. And when this is the only way to add challenge to the game, it leads to more and more and more screen clutter of these effects, which ultimately begin to overlap and become extremely difficult to avoid, especially in tight map layouts, giving a perception of unfairness. Now, I don't know that this is necessarily a big problem, and I especially don't know what the solution here is, given the current state of gameplay in Diablo 4. Now, this season I've seen more people than ever questioning why the Shroud of False Death is considered best in slot for so many builds. Probably because more people are getting more mythic items this season than ever before. So they get the Shroud and they're like, oh, like, so many people are recommending this in so many setups, why? And the reason is, it grants +1 to all passives. All passives in your skill tree, not just the ones you put a point into. All of them, every single passive node. So It's a small amount of power per passive multiplied by a ton of passives to add up to a huge increase in power. And I do wonder what will happen when Lord of Hatred launches with the updated skill trees, because from the preview that we saw, there are no more passives in the skill tree. So they're going to have to rework the Shroud to do something else. And unless they figure out something equally powerful, I think we'll see the fall of the Shroud as a best in slot for everyone. Meanwhile, speculation about the second class coming with Lord of Hatred continues. Maybe the reveal will happen in February. Maybe that's what the hidden roadmap node means. I've seen some speculation that the class may be a Haradrim, since Diablo 3 did establish that some Haradrim were sent to the Scovos Isles, which is where we'll be heading in Lord of Hatred. It's possible, but Haradrim doesn't quite fit with the more sinister-looking silhouette. And since it's unlikely that the class will be an Amazon, I've seen speculation that we'll get an Amazon as a mercenary. That's much more possible than Amazon as a playable class, since it solves the whole gender lock issue as well as the redundancy with the rogue. Now, there were data mined strings in the game prior to the launch of Vessel of Hatred and the reveal of what mercenaries were coming with the game. So we saw the mercenary _ berserker crone string. That mercenary turned out to be Variana. Mercenary the Cursed Child, which turned out to be Altkin. Mercenary Bounty Hunter, which turned out to be Subo. Mercenary Shield Bearer, which turned out to be Rahir. And then we had two others, Mercenary Scholar, as well as Mercenary Maiden and Mongrel. And these are unaccounted for. So theoretically, the Maiden and Mongrel could be an Amazon, though Amazons are not really known to have dog companions, so it is a bit of a stretch. The Scholar, though, theoretically, that could be a Haradrim, since the Haradrim are canonically scholars first and foremost. Now, one interesting thing to note about Season 11, it seems to have the best retention of any season in at least a year, if not in Diablo 4's entire history, at least as per the Steam data. Now, a couple of important points to consider when we talk about Steam data. First off, Steam represents the smallest of Diablo 4's player base between Xbox, PlayStation, and PC Battle.net. We know that D4 sold 12 million copies just within its first 2 months of launch, and estimates from various third-party analytics websites estimate that about 2 million people own Diablo 4 on Steam today. So when looking at Steam data, we're really just looking at a subset of players. So what's important here is not the raw numbers, but rather the trends. In particular, the data with respect to past data. So the trends that we see are showing better retention this season compared to last. 3 weeks in, and 59% of players are still playing, compared to only 47% 3 weeks into Season 10, 43% 3 weeks into Season 9, 45% 3 weeks into Season 8, and 49% 3 weeks into Season 7. Total player count peaks aren't too different either, so it's not like we're sampling a much smaller pool of players or maybe more dedicated. I believe the data clearly shows people are playing for significantly longer this season. Now, as for total players, the peak all-time on Steam was 56,000 back when Vessel of Hatred launched, which then dropped all the way down to 35,000 peak players by the time we reached Season 9. And then Season 10 saw a big rise to 49,000. That's a little inexplicable. Some say it was a free weekend that really bumped those numbers up. The peak we saw for Season 11 was 41,000, which was not higher than Season 10, but higher than any season before it since Vessel of Hatred launch. But do remember that Diablo 4 only released on Steam in late October 2023, along with Season 2. Many Diablo 4 players had already quit before Season 2 launched. They were unimpressed with a rather disappointing Season 1. So a lot of the players that we're seeing coming back with Season 11 now are those that don't own the game on Steam because they got the game back at launch before it even was on Steam. If you look at the Steam data, we never really saw a big fall off of Steam players. The fall off happened from launch players. This really is the best season of Diablo 4 yet. There's many reasons, but Sanctification, I think, is a big one that has helped with retention. It's a fun new chase that has just never existed in the game before. People continue to geek out over their Sanctification outcomes, and they want to share them with others, be it in the clan, be it with friends, be it on social media. Like, check this out here. On my druid, I'm on my third character, by the way. On my druid, I had a non-ancestral unique weapon, and I had forgotten that non-ancestral uniques could get a sanctification outcome that replaces an affix. Will not happen on an ancestral, could happen on a non-ancestral. And so that's exactly what happened. It replaced one of my affixes, and I gasped when I realized what had happened. I had about an affix of 600% extra poison damage, and I'm a poison build, and I lost that. And it got replaced with this affix that triples the effect of gems in the item. Now the thing is, I had runes in my weapon because gems on my weapon were not as important as gems in my armor. So I said, okay, life gave me lemons. Let's try to make some lemonade here. I put the runes in my armor and then ran the math on which would be the gems that I can use, given my current setup, that would give me the biggest damage upgrade when those gems are tripled in power. And I ended up slapping in some emeralds for some big crit damage. And after some testing, this ended up being a considerable damage upgrade for me, making my crits hit for big bonks. Now, as much as the Steam charts paint a pretty picture, the recent Steam reviews do not. Only 44% of recent reviews are positive, and most of the negative reviews seem to revolve around how Blizzard has handled the pricing of Lord of Hatred and Vessel of Hatred going forward. First off, from reading the reviews, there's clearly a lot of confusion. Some people think that they are paying $40 just for the Paladin. Others think that because Blizzard now bundled Vessel of Hatred with Lord of Hatred, it's no longer possible to buy Vessel of Hatred separately. So some people think that by buying Lord of Hatred, they are also buying Vessel of Hatred again. Like, I own Vessel of Hatred, and now this new product is a bundle of Lord of Hatred and Vessel of Hatred, and its price is inflated because it includes Vessel of Hatred. Ergo, I'm paying more to buy Vessel of Hatred again. And even amongst those who understand that Blizzard has basically just made Vessel of Hatred a free add-on for anyone who buys Lord of Hatred, some of them think of it as, well, loyal customers are getting the shaft here. We're getting nothing. Now, in reality, Blizzard did give us loyal customers a free pet as a thank you. And given the price of free pets, that's like a $20, $25 value. But I guess Blizzard did not communicate this well enough because some people think we get literally nothing. Now, personally, I think it would have been a good idea to let people who own Vessel of Hatred get a discount on Lord of Hatred. We're not World of Warcraft players. We don't understand that bundling past expansions for free into the latest expansion is just a thing that Blizzard has been doing for ages. As Diablo players, we've never had a second expansion before. Like, I'm actually seeing people suggest, hey, don't bother buying Lord of Hatred. Just wait for the next expansion to come out, and then you're going to get Lord of Hatred for free. And yeah, can't really argue with that logic. But the people most ticked off, and understandably so, are those who bought Vessel of Hatred recently, like days or weeks before the reveal of Lord of Hatred. So imagine that. You buy Vessel of Hatred, and then you find out, oh, yeah, well now, had you just waited a bit more, you would have gotten it for free when you pre-ordered Lord of Hatred, which is just releasing in another couple months. Now, apparently a number of people have actually been requesting refunds for Vessel of Hatred over Steam and Battle.net, citing that, the product is free now and this and that, and reports are that the refund requests were being honored. Now, another bit of Steam data to consider here, Diablo 4 ranked bronze in Steam's best-selling games of 2025 by revenue, which means it ranked somewhere between 51st and 100th place. As a point of comparison, Path of Exile 2 ranked silver, which puts it between 25th and 50th place. And speaking of, in Path of Exile 2 news, well, the big story of this week is the Temple exploit and its impact on the in-game economy. So let's talk through what happened here. The Temple is the new League mechanic introduced a couple weeks back, where you basically build your own dungeon. Now, it takes a long time to build up all the rooms in your dungeon, to finally be able to do the end state runs. To build up this dungeon, you need to run the League mechanic multiple times each time you want to add rooms. And to do that, you generally got to scout around a map in order to run into it. Well, some players discovered a consistent spawn point for the mechanic towards the end of the campaign in the Holten area. It spawns right by the Holten waypoint. So they just kept resetting Holten to quickly rerun the League mechanic to quickly build up their temple. It cut what was otherwise a very long procedure into something that was just a fraction of the time required. Now, here's the thing. If you are more than 10 levels higher than an area's level, the mechanic doesn't spawn for you anymore. So since Holten is a level 62 area, players were then deliberately killing their characters over and over and over to incur XP penalties to ensure that they never went above level 72, so that they can keep abusing this tactic. So this was clearly unintended gameplay by the devs. It's playing the game in a clearly less fun way in order to profit massively. Whether you want to call that technically an exploit or not is irrelevant. We all know what it is. And speaking massively of profit, if a player gets the league mechanic to spawn, that player can then invite a higher level player who would not otherwise be able to make that mechanic spawn in that area. You can invite that person into your game, and because the mechanic spawned, they can now benefit from the mechanic even if overleveled. So within the community, players began selling access to the mechanic and raking in lots of currency doing so. Meanwhile, players figured out the most optimum setup for the temple, a massive snake with a specific configuration built through an understanding of the spawn mechanics and despawn mechanics of rooms in order to force specific layouts and reduce room decay. I tell you, this game has the most gigabrain players. Well, eventually, GGG hotfixed things. First off, Holten could no longer spawn the mechanic, so that killed that. Also, players could no longer benefit from the mechanic at all if they were significantly overleveled, so you could not even sell access to higher level characters anymore. But because all this happened during the Christmas holidays, GGG was not as quick as usual to respond. This meant that there were a few days during which people were abusing of this, and this also meant that people who had already set up their temples could now continue to run their perfect temples. And people who had not yet set up their perfect temples now had to do it the old-fashioned way, which takes forever, or otherwise just be forced into making a less efficient temple. Then add on to this that part of the hotfix was actually to buff the number of high-level temple runs players can do, and this just resulted in the rich getting richer. The perfected meta snake temples produced absolutely enormous amounts of currency per hour. So now we had a situation where everyone who had abused early and often became a wealthy, untouchable elite, and those who did not abuse of this have no hope of catching up. Now, it is normal for the in-game economy to suffer inflation over the course of a league, but this caused a much more rapid hyperinflation of the economy than usual. People saving up for something found that prices had doubled overnight, or even increased tenfold by the end of things. So a lot of players were mad, with some even quitting the league because of this. Now, personally, I don't play Trade League. I'm mostly solo self-found, so this has zero impact on me or my ability to enjoy the game. But PoE has always been an inherently trade-based game. And introducing a proper in-game asynchronous trade this year, which was an amazing feature to finally get, that really cemented PoE2, especially, as a trade-based game. So I could understand people who care about trade, people who rely on trade to get the gear that they want. I could understand them feeling like suddenly, hey, my game just became more difficult overnight because everything is now massively more expensive. As a non-trade player, I try to think of it like, I'm imagining if all gold costs were suddenly doubled and all the drop rates of currency and gear was cut in half. Yeah, I'd feel pretty crappy. That said, when you have a game with a living, breathing, player-driven economy, one that is not dictated by the devs that this is going to cost that, this is the sort of emergent gameplay that happens. Some streamer discovers a new build, he posts a video about it, and overnight, a previously worthless item has now increased in value tremendously. Of course, devs should kill exploits as soon as possible, but there's always a possibility of market manipulation and otherwise non-exploity ways for unpredictable things to happen with this kind of an economy. It's all part of the ride, and it becomes lore within the community. It becomes a part of the game's history that players got to help shape. Hey, remember that time so-and-so figured out how to abuse the temple and it crashed the economy? Ah, man, I wish I'd gotten in on that before they nerfed it. Man, I was pissed. And if the outcome means that you want to take a break from the game for this league, that's okay. Maybe it gives you a chance to try playing solo self-found. Who knows, you may just come to love that kind of experience. Now, one could argue that the reason this whole mess happened in the first place is due to the temple being a mechanic that is not well explained in the game with regards to its intricacies and how best to optimize it. And it's also extremely punishing to experiment with due to the length of time it takes to set up. You can't reset your temple if you realize you've made mistakes or if you want to try something else. And it can take like 40 hours of play for an average player to complete their temple and reach the final boss, after which one death due to not being familiar with the mechanic or the fight in general will then like just reset your temple, erasing all your efforts. I really like the idea of the temple. I'm always happy to see GGG swing big with experimental features, these big, crazy league mechanic ideas. I love it. And I think with some tweaks, the temple will be a fantastic addition to the game. The reward balance seems to be off right now. A perfectly optimized temple versus the temple an average player will put together will result in night and day differences in rewards, like completely different experiences. I think that gap needs to be narrowed. I think the average player should get a good baseline experience, and then people can follow the top guides to optimize things beyond that at diminishing returns. Like, it should be worth the effort to optimize, but it also should be worth running the temple unoptimized. I don't know how this can be accomplished. I don't believe GGG intended for the current meta tactic to be what players would do with this crazy snake. I think they just created an intricate system with so many possibilities and great depth to it, and players found all the ways to make all the possible interactions work in their favor. I think once Temple goes core, it's gotta take less time and investment to complete the temple. Maybe it also needs to be shared with your alts so that you don't have to remake the temple from scratch if you make a second character, though that's maybe not necessarily if the temple is just a lot easier to complete. But temple aside, the druid is a unilateral success. Still the best druid I've played in any game. It really makes the Diablo 4 druid feel outdated by comparison. And if you look at the Steam charts, this update has seen the best retention yet for a Path of Exile 2 update. 3 weeks in, and player retention is at 43%. The previous update saw a 40% retention rate 3 weeks in, and the Huntress update before, that was only at 34% retention 3 weeks in. But how are you folks feeling about PoE2 these days? Sound off in the comments. In some industry news, the insane inflation of RAM prices may result in next-gen consoles getting delayed beyond their intended 2027-2028 release windows. And honestly, maybe not a bad thing. I feel like game devs have yet to learn to take full advantage of the current gen. I feel like it wasn't that long ago since I got my PS5 and Xbox Series X. That said, the reason for this delay, even if the delay is good, is obviously not good. As per Insider Gaming, console manufacturers are debating whether to delay their next-gen consoles in the hopes that RAM manufacturers will be able to build out their infrastructure to produce more RAM, thus allowing prices to drop. Basically, they're doing what many PC gamers are doing right now, holding off on the hopes that RAM prices will drop, despite all evidence pointing to prices continuing to rise as the AI arms race rages on, with AI data centers continuing to be built and gobbling up all the RAM. As per reports coming out of China and South Korea, as reported by TechSpot, both AMD and Nvidia have been notifying their partners like Asus that they are expected to raise the prices of their graphics cards in early 2026. These price hikes will allegedly only affect current-gen cards, with an RTX 5090 expected to rise in price to as much as $5,000. And that's up from its MSRP of $2,000. Now, obviously, a 5090 is already in enthusiast territory. The average gamer is not buying a 5090, nor does the average gamer need a 5090 to run most games at excellent frame rates. But if even the more entry-level current-gen cards become unaffordable to the average gamer, that does not put our hobby in a great place. Combine that with the insane prices of RAM and the rising cost of SSDs, and it's becoming increasingly difficult for someone to even get into PC gaming. So, good news, everyone! You'll be spending less money on PC hardware in 2026, because prices will be so high that you'll just stick with whatever you already have. Now, thus far, as we've seen prices rise over the years, like with a big price hike of graphics cards during the COVID times, we've seen that consumers were willing to just accept the new prices. But if things finally reach a point where we decide, you know what, I can't justify spending this amount of money on an upgrade. I'll stick to the computer parts I have now, and then sales start dropping dramatically. How will the industry respond? Will we see game devs focus more on optimization for lower-end hardware? Will we see new manufacturers arise as alternatives to the big names controlling hardware to produce more budget-oriented hardware? Will we see a greater push for cloud computing? What do you folks think? Sound off in the comments. Now, in a follow-up story to something we covered a while ago, the sale of EA has been voted through by shareholders. A whopping 99% of the over 200 million investors voted for the $55 billion leveraged buyout, which will result in Saudi Arabia's public investment fund owning 93% of EA. EA's CEO Andrew Wilson, as well as his management team, they're all going to be remaining on board as part of this buyout. With the company now being private and no longer beholden to public shareholders, the idea is that EA can now have more creative freedom to focus on more long-term goals rather than short-term profits, to show shareholders charts that say, number go up. Saudi Arabia seems to have a major interest in sports in general, so I imagine this buy was motivated at least in part by a desire to acquire the biggest sports video game publisher. This also couples with the country's desire to be a major global gaming and esports hub, which allows it to diversify its economy away from a reliance on oil. They had already begun to acquire passive stakes in other gaming companies like Nintendo, amongst many others, but it makes sense to go all in on EA since that company best aligns with their sports and esports angle, all while capturing one of the world's leading game publishers. Instead of building up their own video game infrastructure, just acquire a veteran giant and you automatically have a functional gaming industry with all of its institutional knowledge and vast network of connections. EA also has a portfolio that focuses on yearly releases and live service games that are guaranteed, consistent revenue drivers, so there's really no risk in this investment. Altogether, getting full control of EA and all of EA's IPs instantly puts Saudi Arabia on the map as a major country for video game development. This will allow them to have a big cultural impact on gaming, either directly, like by asking for more games to take place in Saudi Arabia or have Saudi sports teams or just otherwise more representation. So either directly like that or just indirectly over time, as you know, maybe they're going to open up local gaming studios, move development of these major IPs to in-country, and therefore there will be more games made from Saudi developers depicting a Saudi point of view. Now folks, if you missed my video covering what still needs to be fixed in Diablo 4, do check out last week's video, because that's going to wrap up this week's video. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to join Riker's Raiders for more gaming content.